Thank you so much for giving your time, and it's really gives me immense pleasure to have this opportunity to have a chat with you. So thanks so much for doing this,
Most welcome. Thank you so much
and
for having me, Karthik.
it's my pleasure. So Alap needs no introduction, but just as a custom, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce him formally. So Alap is a award-winning playback singer, primarily from the South Indian film industry. So he has sung famous pop, popular tracks like Engeyum Kadal, Ennamo Edo, Yendan Kanmunne, Vayamudi Sumarida from Mogamudi, and so many other songs. And there's also one, Malayalam album song called as Ninjod Cherthu, which became very popular on YouTube. People might be remembering. And as a bassist, he has done session works to almost all top music directors in the film industry. He tours, he does a lot of live shows, and he has also been part of bands like his own Rala, then Huge, and his current project Maka. So we'll chat more about Maka later during this session. So, for any of the bassists who get the opportunity to watch Alap live in future, I would really urge you guys to just whenever it's possible, just go watch him live. Because I remember back in 2014-15, I got the opportunity to see him live, and since then Alap has been a huge inspiration for me as a bassist. And it's one thing to watch him or any other musician on a small screen or on a video. It's altogether crazy experiencing him perform live, especially his trademark, if you may, percussive slaps, those double thumbs, those triplets. Those are all bang on. So I've been your fans since then, and yeah, thanks again for your time.
Thanks, Karthik. That was quite overwhelming, all the introduction.
Yeah. So let's just go by the timeline and talk about your early music influences, songs, especially the songs that and artists that you grew up listening to.
Well, I think it all starts with my parents because they are singers, and my dad is a composer, singer. My mom is a singer, dubbing artist, child actress, marketing director for All India Radio, all that. And my grandmother was my mom's mom. That is, was a very well-known playback singer in Malayalam. So music was always there in the family, and it was always there in the environment at home because my parents used to tour very regularly, especially when I was in my teens and all that. They used to extensively tour. So I was part of the rehearsal sessions, recording sessions. My dad also had a studio. So music was kind of available like 24/7, free of cost. Just that I never had the inclination when I was small. Like most children take up music very early, if you know what I mean. Like
Right, right.
6, 7, most people start singing or they go for some piano classes, guitar classes, something or the other. But I was never into any of that, strangely.
Okay.
And I never had any interest in music. It is as strange as it sounds.
Mm.
In fact, my father forced me to take up keyboard classes under the same bandmate. Actually, my dad had a proper band, so the bass player of the band was Kriba uncle,
Okay.
Kriba Daniel. He's no more, sadly, but he also used to teach keyboard for others. So he was my master for just one day
Okay.
because I just ran away after that because I couldn't just take that staff notations and sit and
Got it.
practice and all that. So I was only interested in playing with my friends in the street and all about cricket, like any 80s kid would do. It was all gully cricket for me.
Got it.
So as strange as it sounds, this was the scene for me. Music was there, but I was never inclined to it. But
Probably
I had the ear for it.
subconsciously taking
Come
all
again?
those, probably subconsciously taking all those things.
I believe so. When I look back, otherwise it doesn't make sense at all. Of course, I also believe the fact that when it runs in your genes, right? I think it's just matter of, some instance, then it all comes out, I guess. So, a long story short, finished schooling, entered Loyola College to do my undergrad. That's when I discovered the love for music. Till then, I was a cricket fanatic. I still am a big cricket fan, but I wanted to become a professional cricketer till I joined my undergrad. And even the first year undergrad, I was never into guitar or singing, nothing.
Okay.
But it was very casual that my friend spotted me humming some tune while we were having some lunch in the canteen in Loyola, and that's how it all started. It was strange as it sounds. It was very casual, and my friend said, "Hey, you're able to sing. Why are you not taking it seriously?" I said, "Hey, no man, no chance. Vera Valilia types." He said, "Hey, no, we have culturals coming up. What's wrong with you, man?" Because I was doing my statistics, BSc statistics, and uh, that's what I'm saying. It all fell in place because our stats department had each musician, a guitar player, drummer, percussionist, keyboard player, singer, everything was there, but a bass player. There was no bass player in the band. And so my friends started forcing me to start singing for culturals. So that's how I started. I basically started as a singer. And bass playing was an accident, I should say, because it was the need of the hour because we didn't have a bass player. And all that mattered back in the day. I still remember 1999 January when I went for Deepwood's culturals at Madras Christian College in the outskirts of Chennai. We were stepping on stage to participate, and I was so scared. Had this severe stage fright. I was begging my friend to leave me alone. He wouldn't. He said, "You have to sing, no matter what." And I had to step on stage and somehow manage my singing. And there was no bass, as I said. So he just, for the second song after I finished singing, he just took one instrument that was on stage, and it happened to be a bass guitar, put it around my shoulder, and he said, "Just stand there."
Okay.
That's how it all started. And then I developed this mad liking towards bass guitar because the first note I played, the resonance I received, it did something to me. And of course, not to forget, the childhood was filled with Ilayaraja songs because 80s Tamil was only Ilayaraja, if you know what I mean. And you switch on the television, then it was Chitrahar or Oliyam Oliyam. For Hindi it was Chitrahar, for Tamil it was Oliyam Oliyam. And occasional movies at the theatre, most 9 out of 10 movies was Ilayaraja. So it was there in the head, imprinted subconsciously but very strongly. So when my casual participation in cultural started, then it all just started flowing like left, right, center.
So, was bass, did you start learning bass directly, or generally mostly people, take guitar and then, after a few years, then they take up bass? How was your
Correct. Mine, it was all strange, man, because I never had a master, if you know what I mean. So I probably didn't learn the right way.
Okay.
I picked up bass, as I said, it was purely through accident. It was put on my shoulders, and I had to make sound out of what I had. It was more like a kid playing with a toy, They wouldn't care what's coming out. It was as strange as it sounds. That's how it started. But what helped me was my ear could identify the notes. If you would play a song, I could, maybe back then I could 50% kind of get it right through my hearing, because I never knew what chords meant. I never knew chord theory. I never knew what are the names of the strings. I was literally blind, if you know what I mean. So it started with bass. Of course, as I said, I started singing first, but once I discovered the love for bass, then it was only bass, and bass. And I didn't have a bass guitar back then, so I begged my mom and got an acoustic guitar. And what I did was, there were 6 strings, obviously. I took off 2 strings and I white spaced 3 strings alone just to mimic the bass. I used to do some crazy things because we could never practice with anything. Back in the day, there were very few rehearsal halls in Chennai. So one such rehearsal hall was on Mount Road, called Demelos. One Mr. Johnny Demelo, an old-time drummer. He had a rehearsal hall with some gear, and that is the only time I could pick up a bass guitar and probably even hold a note and see, oh wow, okay, this is how a note sounds on a bass guitar. And probably the very next day we have to probably go to Jipmar in Pondicherry and perform. So I barely had time to hold the bass and get used to all that until I think late 99 when my mom got me my first 4-string Tansen precision ripoff kind of a
The
bass.
HMI guitar.
So it all started with bass.
Got it. So, so what about singing? Was there any formal training there, or?
No.
Okay.
Even for singing, there was nothing. I believe it's all flowing out from my parents, my grandmother.
Okay.
And what happens is it's we all know music is an extension of language, right? It is definitely communication.
Right.
So if you were to start speaking your mother tongue, you don't go to a Harvard University to start speaking your mother tongue. You kind of mimic what your parents do or what your siblings do, and you kind of mimic those things. I would say for me it was more or less like that. I used to kind of mimic my dad or mom. It was like that. There was a lot of church background that kind of helped me because I was exposed to hymns
Got it.
and a lot of choral stuff and all that. So that definitely helped me to understand what harmonies meant. Harmonies kind of came to me naturally, seconds and thirds and all that was not very tough to understand. Probably not theoretically at that point in time, but if one sings the melody and one asked me to sing the harmony for that, I could do it 8 out of 10 times. So that kind of an upbringing helped, but I didn't have a formal training in bass, guitar, or singing.
Okay. Interesting. But I think your analogy that you gave is pretty interesting about the language. So that's
Yeah, I
nice
mean,
analogy.
yeah, it makes sense, isn't it? If you
Right.
just look at it, of course, a formal training is definitely, I would say, a must. I could vouch for it at this point in time because whatever little I've learned is completely through trial and error and through extensive research of my favorite bass players or even non-bass players and a lot of listening. How hundreds, tens of hundreds of listening hours. I can vouch for that.
Nice. So, talking about bass players and listening. So, let's talk about once the moment once you entered the industry started doing sessions,
Hmm.
right? So, can you share some of the interesting stories or experiences? Some things like, people always have this, behind the scene so-called things about tracks.
Yeah.
In the track Pati Teri Maan, when I was recording this, I did it in one take. Some of those crazy memories of.
Well, all I can think of at this point in time is my first session was in 2007, a professional film recording session, and it was for bass playing, not for singing. It was for G.V. Prakash for Polladavan.
Oh,
And the first recording itself was extremely memorable. I can never forget that. And strangely, it was not the recording itself. It was how I planned the recording around my working hours because I got the call. It was on a weekday and it was working hours probably by noontime, 11ish or something. I received a call. And you all know about Rahul Nambiar. He's a playback singer, right? And he's one of my best buddies. So he had entered the industry much before me, and he was kind of started singing for G.V. Prakash and a lot of other music directors. So I believe when G.V. was scouting for new players, so Rahul suggested my name, and they immediately said, "Okay, call him now. Let's just do a session." That's how Rahul called me and said, "Macha, session irke kalami vandru." I'm like, "Dude, I'm at work." He said, "What's wrong with you, man? G.V. Prakash is calling you and you're saying you're at work." So I had to stitch a lie around the entire thing, and I had to tell my project manager that, a friend of mine had an accident and he was in the ICU and all that jazz. I felt terrible, but I had to do it. No other go because I can't let it go because that's what is there in my mind. I was in the IT, yes, but 24/7 my entire thought is, okay, when am I going to take music full time? So when I'm getting this chance, how do I let it go? So that's how I went for my first bass playing session for this movie, Polladavan. Wearing all formals with an ID card and all that, I literally rushed to my house to pick up my bass, rushed to the studio and meet him. It was such a cool dude. He's, made me comfortable. And it was this last track of the movie, a track called Alibaba Tangam. So that was my debut as a bass player in the film. So extremely special. It was 2007 actually.
So by this time was Ralap already in place, the Ralap project?
Certainly. Actually, Ralap, as you rightly said, it is basically what it means is Rahul plus Alap is Ralap. And I met Rahul when I was doing my post graduation in Venkateshwara. I was doing my MCA. And again, luck was with me. I discovered music when I was doing my undergrad in Loyola. And briefly after I discovered this love for music and bass and all that, then again reality hits me, and pressure from home that I have to take up higher education, better do something stable in life and all that, just like any youngster would face. So I had to kind of keep music aside and start taking entrance exams and all that. So I got my MCA. Then I entered MCA at Venkateshwara. First year of my MCA, there was zero music. And not that I was depressed, I was okay. I was kind of moving forward in life. But the second year, when I moved to second year, the first year guys, there was a very special musician in the first year. His name is Kaushik Purushothaman. He happens to be Ilayaraja sir's drummer's son, Purushothaman uncle's son, so Puru uncle's son. Sadly, Puru uncle is no more with us. That also really brings a lot of hurt in me, because I was quite close to uncle. And it was Puru uncle's son, Kaushik, being my junior. And I had seen Kaushik when I was competing in Loyola College. He was my opponent, and so we could recognize each other's faces. And that's when we had a chat during some break or something. He said, hey, and all that. And he said, okay, let's form a team. Again, we started another live music team. That was probably the first step that I started getting this confidence. Hey, probably this could be my career. And when we formed the team, thanks to Kaushik, we got, again, it all fell in place. We had a percussionist, drummer, I was the bass player, we had guitar, we had rhythm guitar, and a couple of singers were there. But we were scouting for a male singer, and that's when Kaushik suggested Rahul's name. He was then doing his BCom in Loyola College. And we met, we hit it off really well. We started participating in culturals, and we started winning prizes. So that's when Rahul and I started developing this real good chemistry, personally and musically. And we used to meet up quite a lot, either in my house or in his house. We used to just jam, and we used to just come up with tunes. For some strange reason, we used to get tunes, and we used to be thrilled. We never used to play to others, but we used to be really thrilled. And that's when we thought, okay, maybe we should do something together. And both of our dreams were similar. He was also a postgraduate. In fact, he has a double PG. He was working, then he worked at HDFC. I worked with HCL and Verizon. So we had this dream together that we have to get into music full time, and we should do our own music and all that. That's how Ralap, started. That's when we started discovering the composition side of us, and we worked on 7 tracks. And we released it in 2009. Strangely, again, GV was the one who came and released it for us, and that is a very interesting ride.
So I mean, Ralap, for me, obviously after discovering you as a bass player, so I also went back and checked your non-film things, and that's how I discovered Ralap also. So there are a couple of videos on YouTube, right? So Ralap as a project is really interesting in terms of it tapping into the indie roots, not mimicking a typical rock band or not mimicking a pop band or nothing.
No.
Something I would want to compare something in lines with the Enjoy Enjami thing which Santosh Narayan has done, right?
You could say that.
Like but not exactly the same. But I'm talking in terms of something which is purely original. It's neither a copy of West. Because I think in all of your tracks there are some influence of Spanish music and African music, and
a lot of influences,
a lot of things. So I think probably if YouTube and all these social media were there back then, it could have been much more bigger for sure.
Yeah, we keep thinking about all that, but well, we can find hazar reasons, but the point is, at that time, did we enjoy? That's all that matters to both
Right.
of us, and we did thoroughly enjoy. And the beautiful part was, out of the 7 tracks, the seventh track was a remix of one of the 6 tracks, actually. So technically, 6 individual tracks, all 6 were live. Starting from drums to percussions to bass, guitar, you name it, everything was recorded live. And all the top artists were my good friends, and they all came and supported our music. And they didn't charge a penny, if you know what I mean. We had the best musicians playing each instrument, and we had a ball of a time. It took some time for us to, complete it, but still, it was a great ride.
So someone was being part of both an indie music scene, so to speak, and also been part of the film industry. So what are the differences that you see in both of them?
Well, to start with commercials, film music has more commercials involved because it's a bigger market.
Right.
That's the only reason people are more comfortable doing film stuff, because there's a face to your song.
Right.
There is the concept of having an actor. That's why we call it playback.
Right.
And there is more audience, and so there's much more funds involved in it. And probably that's why it is a little more feasible to be into the film world, purely for the economics of things. But having said that, if you remember the 90s, the independent scene was probably as big as the Bollywood or the Collywood, if you know what I mean.
All
Yeah, the
the
Magnus
Pradeep
Sound
Reddy,
days.
Alisha Chennai, and all those guys.
Yeah, you name it. Sonu Nigam,
Right,
Colonial
right.
Cousins, you name it.
Colonial Cousins. I think
All.
those guys were bigger than the film
Yeah,
industry
you could.
at a point.
Exactly. There was a period when those cassettes used to get sold much more than the film cassettes. You know what I mean? So, and in fact, those were the pre-internet days.
Right, right,
And yet it was so distinct, and it was a hit, man. Every car used to play Dalar Mehendi. Every
right, right.
single car. You go to Besant Nagar in Chennai,
Mm.
every freaking car used to play Dalar Mehendi, or Khalid, or
Right, right,
Alisha Chennai. You know what I mean? All those pumpy tracks.
right,
And that was the time when people were discovering some good sounding music systems, and they used to spend money and put it in their car,
right,
and people to thump it around. So uh, we are not questioning about the how an independent music is identified, or if it's as big as commercial mainstream music. The only difference is there is no parent, if you know what I mean. If the film industry has a producer, the guy who pumps in money, and they run the business.
mm,
In independent music, especially after the internet era, then there was tremendous amount of piracy,
mm,
right? Till I think piracy is pretty much under control now, but there was a time when it used to be piracy was at its peak.
correct,
So not much could be done for by the musicians because they had good content, but there was no label who could identify an artist, invest in them, trust them, and make some good songs out of it, get videos done, and promote them. You know what I mean? It is definitely coming back. It isn't like before. Independent music is definitely booming big time. I feel it's a matter of time. But purely for the economics part, I think film industry is huge
right,
because of the involvement of actors, and it's so hero driven, right? Bollywood or any division of film industry in India,
right,
it's very hero driven, heroine driven, villain driven, if you know what I mean.
right, right,
That's probably the only difference. The biggest difference to me, I feel, is the commercials. But with the current popularity of internet and the availability of YouTube and so many things on our mobile phone, I think it's just a matter of persisting what you do, and you're sure to reach much more people, without a doubt.
uh, so I have a very weird, fun, hypothetical question. So, be there a situation where you are asked to choose between Alap as a playback singer and a bass player, and you can't go back. Like you'll have to decide either one. So what would it be hypothetically?
Okay, well, there are few questions where no matter what and how you twist, you're going to pretty much get the same answer. See, Okay, let me make it more boring for you. Okay, how am I going to make it more boring? It's like consider as of one of my eyes, bass and singing. I need both. Let's just keep it at that.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I try to do both, and there were times when I used to concentrate on one a little more than other, but at never at any point in time I thought one was higher than the other. Never.
Oh, oh. It was a surprise for me because I was kind of hoping and anticipating that you would choose bass, but it was a surprise.
Well, it depends because I wear different hats. There have been shows that I've just played bass, even commercial gigs. I've just played bass, and there have been shows where I've just sung and I have not played bass, and I enjoy both. And to me, music is much more than that. Even if I'm playing, say, there have been shows, not many shows, but there was one particular show when I was touring with Dr. L. Subramaniam. We were touring the Europe, and there was a gig in Iceland, and that was a very special gig because we were in an island. Um, the population is barely 1,000 or 1,500, and we were at the tip of a cathedral, and we had to play inside the cathedral, and the view from the cathedral was icebergs, if you know what I mean. It was like surreal. Point being, I was obviously going to play the bass, but the cathedral was so resonant that anything coming through a speaker was too loud. So Dr. LS said, Alap, I think bass is going to be a bad idea. I said, sir, no problem. I'm going to do something else. And the entire gig I played shakers.
Oh, okay.
And I was just backing up the percussionists. And I had the time of my life because to me, music is an extension of me. I don't care. As long as there is something that is being added to that particular moment, I'm happy. Of course, there's no doubt that I enjoy playing bass. There's no doubt about I still consider myself as a bass player who can sing, and not a singer who can play bass. If you know what I mean.
So talking about the fact that you're a bass player who can sing. So just for
Hmm.
people who are non-musicians, I'd like to bring it out that singing and guitar, or singing and playing piano, or singing and playing a tabla or dholak, it's one thing. But I know for a fact that playing bass and singing is altogether a different monster, because at
It's
times
a different ballgame.
it's at times it becomes melodic, or at times it's rhythmic. It's pretty confusing, and I would consider Alap as India's Mark King, India's Jack Bruce, India's Geddy Lee, India's Sting, whatever you call.
Oh my
Because I
God.
think, as far as I know, you're the only one who is at least commercially, doing both of these things pretty well.
Well, let's just say it's a journey, and it really scares the hell out of me. Even now, when I think of the fact that I have to sing and play on a stage, it really scares me. And it took some time for me to even play Enamo, though that's the song that I've sung, and I've sung it so many times. But even today, when I get on stage to play bass and sing at the same time, I'm like, okay, let me just do this. I can do this. I can do this. I have to calm myself down because maybe it's not a technically difficult song to play, but still, the fact that you have to keep the beat and timing bang on with the drummer, and yet probably do some ornamentation in between just to keep my ego happy, and yet sing in key, hopefully, and not forget my lyrics, and yet I don't stare at my fretboard and look all odd in front of the screen. So many things that you got to think, and it took some time for me to get my head around it, and finally I kind of became comfortable. But when I used to sing and play Ilayaraja songs, oh my God, that is scary. And there have been times when I've sung Megam Kotatam, I've sung and played
Oh,
2 3 gigs.
okay.
Oh my God, I've sung and played Mantram and the Tendril.
Okay.
So what I had to take a blueprint of the fretboard
Mm,
and I had to just play.
mm,
I can't, I can't do Megam tu re kutatum tum. What happens? The audience is distracted when they see you distracted.
right, right.
And I used to do this all the time because I never knew how it was done. Though I knew, okay, maybe the only way to get this done is just keep playing, keep singing. Eventually, you will get there. It took some. I'm still working on it actually, and it really scares the hell out of me when I have to think, I have to sing and play. But it's fun when eventually you pull it off. Oh my God, it's super fun.
Yeah, it's even a joy to watch you. So, like, one recommendation for people watching who haven't seen this, you guys should go and check the last year's video, Alap and Saindavi's tribute to Sridevi.
Hmm.
So, two, three things. Obviously, the last song, your from the Sigapur Ojakal film, Nineveh Parvai. So
Nineveh Parve.
that was beautiful. And about the playing, the Sendura Puve, the when the part comes, Jilendra Katre. So you did some bit of improvisation there also. Din, 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 din. So it was like, so it's just very small part. Obviously, credits to composition also, but that small, improv, it's like, I kept playing that again and again. So basically that entire gig is a good example of Alap singing and showing his good skills, especially Kanne Kalemane also I think you sang and played. So it's a wonderful
Yeah, and even Hey Unnai from the same gig, but it's not part of the
right,
same video.
right.
I had uploaded it separately, and that's another song. It's a very musician song. It's a very bass player song. You can do some slapping and all that. So
Right.
that was also fun. There are a lot of tracks actually. Even my time with Project Huge was when actually I discovered this entire thing of playing and singing at the same time. That was 2012 is when I kind of got into playing, singing, and all that, trying to figure things out. So it's a journey that will never end because there's so much to learn, and there are so many stalwarts out there. So I keep learning, looking at them.
So, talking about 2012, I think that's when there are a few videos of yours from Kappa TV, right? Kadalini Thirupponar and all those.
2013 is when we recorded, and it released in 2013 October 16th is when we shot the entire Music Mojo Kappa TV episode. We shot 12 songs, out of which I sang 5, and another track was sung by my friend, and the remaining 6 was instrumental. Most of it were our own compositions, and it released around I think February or March 2014. And that was also a great ride, man, because we had to rehearse it so much because we didn't want to waste time during the shoot.
Hmm.
So we went, rehearsed, and luckily it was all well shot and well recorded actually.
So who are your, bassists who are your influences?
Well, I would like to split into Indian and Western for sure. In Indian music, for sure it's Ilayaraja. Ilayaraja's music plays a huge role. So when I say Ilayaraja's music, there is a lot, not just bass. Bass is, of course, an important ingredient, no doubt. I'm sure all of you all will agree. You will agree, I'm sure. You've covered some songs yourself from Ilayaraja. So it is not just bass. I mean, if at all I know a little about how chord theory works, it's all by studying Ilayaraja songs actually. And every little thing, the singing, the composition, the arrangement, the strings arrangement, and each of the musicians' participation in each song, it's mind-boggling how all of them came together as one robust unit for so many years and gave such quality songs, And back in the day, there was zero help from technology, and all these things had to be done in one take. So all these things just takes my head out of the hook, And I can't just come to terms. How the hell did he compose so many songs in such a short notice? And even more difficult that he gives the notations to all these musicians, and they all nail it. Starting from Balu sir, Das sir, Janaki Amma, Chitra Amma, Sushila Amma, you name it. There are so many stalwarts. Starting from G. Ramanathan to M.S. Vishwanathan to Ilayaraja to Rahman to Harris to Yuvan. I have respects for each and every one of them, because the fact that you're a creator, and even the fact that you're a form of the creation, is something mind-boggling to me. So my earliest influences were, coming back to your question, my earliest influences were Ilayaraja for sure, and indirectly Sasi sir, because he was predominantly the bass player for Raja sir, and initial days Vijay Manal sir. All of them are huge inspirations, but that's more on the melodic side. But if you say the entire technique and the flashy stuff and all the percussive playing stuff, the initial influence for me was Abraham Laboriel. Um, of course, Victor Wooten, Richard Bona, Adam Nitti, Mark King, and Rick Fiarabracci, who used to play with Yanni. And there are so many more. Probably I'm not getting the names at this point, but there are so many more. But these names that I mentioned, for sure, they play a huge influence in some form or the other. And even some non-bass players, actually. I'm a huge fan of Lee Ritenour, Dave Grusin. I have most of their collection. So the bass player who's played with Lee Ritenour, like Anthony Jackson, Melvin Lee Davis. Oh my God, monstrous players. So, but people like Melvin Lee Davis or Nathan East, I get inspired by their tone and their pocket. People like Abraham Laboriel, I just watch him, I just see the sheer joy in his performance. Sheer joy. He doesn't care, what the others think. He's there in the moment, and I just love it. I just love to see him perform. And people like Richard Bona, oh my God, I mean, he's a monster, right? And Mark King and all that, I can't still come to terms how he does all those technical stuff, and he plays and sings at the same time. So these are the names that I can think of immediately. And of course, the guy who got me into bridge pickup playing, the one and only Jaco Pastorius. The one and only Jaco Pastorius is. So there are many more influences. As I said, it's not just bass players. Many drummers, many composers, many guitar players. I'm a huge fan of Steve Vai. Big fan of Steve Vai. He's not a bass player, but I just love his music, his playing, and I love his philosophy. So a lot of influences,
And do you listen to metal?
Not on a regular basis, but I'm a person who believes in taking inspiration out of anything and everything. So I love Metallica. I love Iron Maiden. I love Slipknot for some strange reason. I'm not into thrash and death, yet I just love what they do. To me, the energy drives me mad. So, but I think I'm a bigger Metallica fan, I would say, because I just love their composition and their songwriting. I do so yeah, answer to your question, I do listen to metal, probably not on a regular basis, but I do listen.
So coming back to your percussive style of slapping, which I mentioned earlier, so is there any tips that you can give us, or how did you develop that particular
style? I would say main influence would be Victor Wooten when it comes to slapping. Well, my suggestion is, before we touch the instrument, it is about developing an internal clock. How do you do it? You just like drummers do air drumming, right? They keep mimicking a drum kit. You don't necessarily need to be in front of a drum kit. Something like that. So what you have to do is, it all starts from listening to a ton of music, because every genre, and don't limit yourself to one particular genre, because every genre has something inspiring, and there is a lot to learn from every genre. So the beautiful part about our brains are that it's extremely smart, and it just keeps grasping whatever you hear, and and if you are listening to it in the right attitude, it acquires a lot of information. So I feel it all starts with listening, and a lot of listening, and a lot of listening. And of course, you find an instrument that inspires you. And I don't believe in having 4-string, 5-string, 6-string, 7-string. It really doesn't matter, you pick something that you love. If you think, I want to start at the 6-string bass, why not? You should just do it. Because I see some people saying that the real bass is 4-string. Well, I don't agree. Well, the real bass is anything that elevates the music. How does it matter if I play a 2-string bass or a 5-string or a 10-string? It really doesn't matter. People like Bill Dickens, who plays on a 7-string, and he just kills it. And of course, the one and only Victor Wooten, Jaco Pastorius, they've killed it with a 4-string, or an Anthony Jackson at the 6-string, or a Jimmy Johnson at the 5-string. So the number of strings don't count. You should just listen to your heart. And I believe in mimicking first, just like a language. So if you love an artist, try and mimic them, because the beauty is your search is so honest. that you will eventually find your own voice, because that's what happened to me. And that's why it's very difficult for me to say this is the person who got me into this. It's a collective thing, because I tried to mimic each of them at different times. Then of course it's about spending a lot of time with your instrument and being honest with the instrument. When I say honest, is you got to develop a relationship with the instrument. I firmly believe in it. And I don't believe in how expensive your instrument is. It really doesn't matter. You need to develop a connect, because I kind of, it might sound silly, but I speak to my instruments sometimes. And I take care of them like babies, literally. And to me, that matters a lot. And as I said, internal clock. So coming back to internal clock, playing with metronome definitely helps, especially if you're getting into the percussive stuff. You got to be rhythmic, and you can't keep relying on clicks. So you practice with clicks so much that eventually you don't need it anymore, because your internal clock would have developed so well that you don't need the click, if you know what I mean. And as I said, listening has helped a lot for me. And I still remember an instance when Victor Wooten came to Chennai in 2010 as part of his India tour with Guitar Prasanna. Guitar Prasanna initiated this India tour, and Victor was playing bass with him. So he came to Chennai for a gig, and he conducted a workshop in Chennai, and needless to say, all the bass players were there, including me. And we were watching him in awe, because the kind of stuff he did that day was incredible. The kind of solos he played and the kind of interaction he had. And I still remember when the question and answer session opened up, there were a lot of questions raised to him, and I was one of the guys who asked some questions. So I did ask him about how do you keep that steady clock, because you listen to him play, you kind of know that, there's something, you can always move your shoulders. There's so much groove and rhythm. Even if there aren't much notes, the rhythm is so strong, and it makes you dance. So I asked him, I was very curious, how did you develop that? And he just called me on stage. He just asked me, are you a bass player? I said yes. He said, come on stage. And oh my God, that was one of the happiest and scariest times in my life. And he offered me his bass guitar, his Forera Yang Yang, and he asked me to play. I said, I was so scared. I said, no, it's okay, I'll have my Yamaha. And I put my Yamaha. And he said, okay, you asked me about internal timing. And he asked me, who do you play with regularly? I told my drummer friend's name. His name is Gio Raj. He's a very good friend of mine. So he said, oh, okay, so you play with Gio a lot. Cool. He said, just play a groove. I was so scared. I played something. It was horrible. And he said, okay, now can you just close your eyes, play the same thing. But imagine Gio Raj, the drummer, is right next to you, but don't open your eyes. Close your eyes and imagine he's playing. And he asked me to play the same thing again. And believe it or not, I played much tighter. And I could feel it. I could feel that I was grooving more. And it is just a simple thing that he said, but he made me do it. He gave an answer through my own playing. And I kind of got a standing ovation by everybody. And Victor was clapping himself. I was like, holy flicks, what the hell is happening here? So, that matters a lot. It's about imagination. So when I say internal clock, it's about imagining, feeling the music, and just keeping the groove. There's a song by Victor Wooten saying that if you have nothing else to do, just groove. So we are bass players first. So what matters the most is, of course, when the solo spot comes, it's really not my cup of tea. I'm not much of a solo artist, but I love to just keep the groove. I just love to keep the groove. So I would say you got to listen to a lot of types of music and develop an internal clock. The pulse, the bounce, it's very important. It's not about playing just as a machine, but it's about bouncing within the click. So you got to explore a lot.
So another extension to the same question, this is something more personal to me, is how as a musician, how do you push yourself and move to the next step? So I'll tell you a problem that I regularly face. At times I might start and practice new stuff. Okay, I might see some videos. I'll pick up a book or a lesson, and I'll say, okay, let me practice this. And after a while, after a few weeks, you go back to your comfort zone. That I end up playing the same songs that you are used to. So somewhere that the drive to push yourself to the next level. So well, you have to struggle a lot to motivate yourself. So how do you do that?
Well, I am with you, buddy, because I have the same issue. I try myself. Of course, we could, especially in today's world, we get to see so much material. You open Instagram, you open YouTube. There are so many incredible musicians, and it just after a point, it's demotivating because the kind of playing they're doing, and to make things worse, the teenagers or even 7-year olds, they're just killing it. They're tearing the instrument apart, and you'll be like, so before I used to be in awe, now I'm like a numb. I just watch it, I'm like, hey, wow, press a like and just move. So I don't know. I guess I'm asking a more important question to myself. As I said, when we all know music is a language, like rightly, if you go listen to Victor Wharton's speech, it inspires you so much, and that's the beauty of what he says. And I firmly believe in it. If music is a language, does not everybody needs to become a master of ceremony. You don't need to be a speaker in Rajya Sabha.
Right.
You know, if all that matters is I speak and you understand what I'm speaking. Similarly, vice versa. And if we are able to hold a conversation for an hour or so, I think we are already in the right path. So my point being, do I use the most complicated words in dictionary and show you that I know so much, and you still search for the meaning of those words? Or do I keep the communication simple yet effective and we have a meaningful conversation? Which one do you prefer? I prefer the latter. This does it mean you shouldn't push yourself forward? Certainly not. Pushing yourself is not about learning chops alone, right? It's about elevating a song. Like if I'm a bass player, I should do justice to a song or to the guy who's hired me. Now, how do I do that? If I keep slapping and doing all the runs, it's definitely going to take away the soul of the song. If it's my solo spot, okay, that's a different scene. But if I'm hired to be the bass player, I rather work on my timing. I work on my tone, the feel, and the choice of notes. All these things matter to the end product. No, so I spend a lot of time polishing my tone. I check out tons of videos every day. Even now, even 1 hour back, I was doing all kinds of research in the kind of pickups. Okay, now what do you do if you change the pickup to this distance to this distance? What kind of strings and all that? That search for me at this point in time is extremely important because the technology now is so advanced. Every little nuance you can hear it, and it's not like before. Even on a mobile phone, people can hear bass. So I am still inspiring myself in that sense. But if I'm trying to push myself to learn "Got a Match" by Chick Corea, of course that's nice. I sometimes do that, but when I find that roadblock, right, I try to sway away and just keep my groove and probably play the simplest of ballads and get a smile on my face. And to me, that is a fruitful day for me, because music to me is beyond technique. It's about communication. And if I play, or if you play, and if somebody else is getting moved, then which means you're on the right path. But if you're doing all kinds of stuffs and people are like, yeah, it was nice, but if you're in that zone, then I feel it doesn't make sense, because then you're just talking to yourself. You're not having a conversation.
Nice. I mean, some of the key takeaways were, especially the spiritual connection that about, how you quoted Wooten. It also reminds me of
Absolutely.
Dave Leborian, who is equally, spiritual, and you spoke how he's always enjoying, even if you watch his video demonstrating a Yamaha bass, he'll make all those sounds like he's in his own world. As you told, he won't mind, he won't care what people are. He'll just enjoy himself. And
Yeah, but let's not forget the cake. Okay, it's not about the icing that he does all the flashy stuff. He's a He's a proper graduate from Berkeley. I believe he's a gold medalist. I'm not sure about that, but he's completed the 4-year full course from Berkeley, and he was one of the topmost LA sessions artists, probably the most widely used bass player of all time, I believe.
Correct. I think
So even if you listen to somebody like a Nathan East, like why is he standing out so much? Why is a Leland Sklar or Nathan East being hired into a band like Toto? If you know what I mean.
right.
Because their groove, their sense of tone, their sense of timing, it's something else. And for me, all those things are inspiring. I love Melvin Lee Davis's slap tone. Oh my God, how does he get it? Sounds like a keyboard slap tone. And the sense of timing, he locks with the drummer, like just like as if it's programmed and quantized. I mean, to me, I'm still working on those things, how to elevate a song. Even if it's one note, how to elevate the song. I want somebody to smile when I just play the first note, or even one of the notes. I want them to look at me and say, okay, I feel you. To me, that's success. And I'm still working on it.
And also the another beautiful analogy that you gave about music as a language, and about do you want to make it complicated by using hard words, or in the end it's about how swiftly you communicate to others.
Yeah. So if you are in a congregation of intellects, then you have to use their language. So the point is, what kind of genre are you using? If you claim yourself to be a jazz musician, you bloody be good. And I'm not a jazz musician. I don't claim to be. I've been part of quite a lot of jazz shows, incidentally, and I've always felt inferior because the vocabulary is so rich, the harmonic content is so rich and dense. You got to really be inside that to decode it, if you know what I mean. It's beyond learning. You should be engrossed in it. You should listen to it kind of 24/7 times a number of years to even know what's happening. Then it becomes part of you. So unless you are in that zone and that's what you want to specialize in, that's a different ball game altogether. And that is also communication, but that communication should happen with somebody who understands that. Then it's fine. I'm talking about more from if I'm hired as a bass player on the other side of things, like commercial music. See, again, music, it really doesn't matter. Any music is good music to me. And if I'm hired to do a particular job, I'm always excited. I'm always excited, be it the most simplest or the most difficult. I'm excited equally. And even if it's the last song of the gig, I'm excited. So I'm in that constant search of how can I be excited. I'm constantly doing that. I talk to myself, I guess, and I am always reminding myself, why did I choose this profession? There's a reason why I chose this profession, because I had a good paying job and I was climbing up the ladder technically, and I had a 6 years experience. But why did I choose this job? Because I love it. So if you love something, would you ask so many questions yourself? You just do it. And I just want to do it. That's it.
Nice. So also talking about how you spoke about you speaking to your instruments and caring for them like a baby. So I think I've noticed through your post that your Yamaha bass, I think you have modded almost everything except for the body and the neck.
Yeah.
If I'm not wrong, you own two custom bass guitars, right?
Yes.
So
I have 2 custom 6 strings.
so I think needless to say you are a bass nerd for sure. So so when it comes to your requirement about a bass, okay. So is it something that you have a design or certain sounds and things, research that you already do in your mind, and you then go back to the luthier and say, this is how I want it, or is it other way around that you go to a luthier and explore, what all things can be done, and then how is it?
Well, the first custom that I had made was from Ereza. It's a 6 string, it's right here. It's a 6 string custom. This is modded after a Fodera Monarch, actually. This at that time I was a big fan of this design, and I did give him some references as to what kind of tones I wanted. Yes, but The thing with custom bass is you really don't know what you're getting into till you actually play the instrument.
Right.
So even this is kind of a heavy guy.
Mm.
This is a heavy guy, but I've learned to, be part of an extension of this guy. It took some time, but now I'm kind of okay. Yeah, I did have some references initially, but after a point, when I got the instrument, I had a learning curve,
Correct.
right? But whatever instruments I've bought, it was completely new to me. Even when I bought my Yamaha in 2005 from UK, I was working in UK, and I got my Yamaha like that. I had no idea how a Yamaha TRB would sound. No idea. I wanted a Yamaha TRB because my idol Abraham Laboril was using a Yamaha TRB. That's all I cared. I didn't know how it sounded. I didn't know the one that he used was a neck through, and what is a PJ configuration. It was made in Japan. That I got to know much later. Oh, okay, that's a different beast altogether. Because it is not the label that matters. It's the wood. It's the pickups. It's the placement of pickups, and of course the player. So many things, and I understood. I could never become Abraham Labori. But it was a constant search of listening to my favorite artists, and every one of them had an incredible tone. Incredible tone. Any of the artists that we discussed about, listen to their tone. It is incredible because they know the physics of the instrument to start with. So I would say I'm still researching. Even my second custom, this took 2.5 years for me to get my hands on. My second custom took 5 years. So I had no idea how it would sound till I got it in my hand. And I have a fretless, which was initially a fretted, converted to a fretless. So there are no exact references. It is a combination of what I think I like, along with what they have to tell me, the luthiers have to tell me. Then I just go with the flow. After a point, I just go with the flow. Because I still feel nothing like going to a store, walking into a store, playing an instrument, falling in love with it, and buying it. Probably the only instrument I bought like that was a GNL L2500. I used to have a GNL, blue color GNL. I've used it extensively for gigs and recordings. I've sold it now. That one instrument, I walked into a store and I accidentally played and I just fell in love with it and I bought it. But the other instruments, I just got it and then fell in love with it.
So,
Yeah.
what do you think is the wood of a bass much more important? It decides the tone or the pickup? Because I've always had different school of thoughts whenever I speak to experts, luthiers and players. What's your take? Is it the
Well, of course, you put pickups on metal plate. Obviously, it'll sound different. So wood does make a difference. There's no doubt about it. Wood, that's the foundation of everything. Now, the question is, does Swampash sound more punchier than a mahogany or an alder? Well, that's subject to discussion. And I'm not a wood expert, but from what I understood, is Swampash is a little scooped in the mids. So if you listen to any bass player who slaps, most of their basses are Swampash bodies. Marcus Milan, and mostly it'll be a bolt on, because the way it responds to a bolted instrument is much, I guess it's the attack compared to a through neck, because now this is a bolt on, but my other custom is a through neck, and I hear the difference, the way the slap reacts. So the combination starts from the wood, whether it's bolt on or neck through. Pickups, yes. I would say the placement of pickups more than the pickups itself matters the most. Then comes the strings. So the parameters, you can never say, I'm sure you're not going to get a straight answer from any bass player or any guitar player on this. It's a combination of wood, how well it is made, how well everything is jolted together, how well everything is robust and glued and sounds as one unit, to the hardware used, to the nut, to the material of the bridge, to the placement of the pickups, and the kind of magnets used in the pickups. Is if it's ceramic, you get a brighter sound. If it's Alnico 5 is a little more stronger magnet, and generally it's a little more punchier on the lows and slightly less brittle on the highs. To the placement of where those magnets are placed, and is it a one pickup or a two pickup combination, and is it a 2-band EQ or a 3-band EQ or a 4-band EQ or a passive instrument. Then comes the strings, all these things, and you change the strings, it'll sound like another instrument altogether. So strings play a huge role, most often I think overlooked, especially on a bass. You can hear it much more than a guitar.
Correct.
It sounds like another instrument altogether. And is it round one or flat one? And if it's round one, are you using stainless steel or nickel? So on and so forth. So I think it's 5 to 6 parameters, and finally comes to these two guys. Your left hand and right hand, how you pluck it, what is your intensity, which part of the guitar are you holding and playing, then your cable, then your, so it's a chain. It's a chain. You can never say one decides everything. Impossible.
So talking about chain, like, would love to know your signal chain for both live setup as well as recordings.
Well, bass, cable, PA.
Oh, okay. So you don't use any.
Well, for namesake, I do have a Zoom B3 processor that I use for live gigs with an expression pedal, but I use it as a volume pedal actually. Why do I use it? If at all I need to play some stuff, I just have a filter and a delay, and I hardly use it. So basically, it's mostly on a bypass, and I use it for tuner mostly. So it's like a big size tuner. So in fact, I don't even rely on amplifiers. Even if I don't have an amp, I really don't care. I mean, I just rely on what I hear, and I kind of judge with the PA sound and with the wedges. And if the stage is too big, then yes, amp helps, because just to balance the entire sound of the stage. So that's what I do for live gigs. It's definitely much less complicated. But for recordings, I'm trying out quite a lot of things. I've made a pedal board after 2.5 years of collecting pedals, and I patched my own pedal board just before the lockdown, COVID. I think late 2019, I got a pedal board made with a wireless unit installed in it, and it's a proper stereo rig with an Eventide H9, Boss M3 switcher, drive, filter pedal, all these things, synthesizer and all that. So I'm exploring a lot of things, but by the time I could explore, then this entire COVID thing came gushing down, so I couldn't explore much into that. But I keep exploring things.
So, also talking about your live bass setup, how you told. So, which was one of your favorite venues to play so far in terms of sound, where you felt the sound was perfect, and it was fun to play? Is there any one gig or one venue, one show?
That's kind of tough actually, for me to recollect like that. Generally, outdoor gigs are much more fun, because the audio guy has much more flexibility to pump the audio up, because it's outdoor. And when you do that, what happens? You get a much more punchy low end out, and you don't need to tame your bass guitars EQ down. You know what I mean? So in general, of course, outdoor gigs are fun, but I've kind of figured how to work around on the most ridiculous looking venues, even if it's a reverberating and echoing venue. I have had so many gigs like that, which when I used to just go to the stage or just see from the audience side, I'm like, how are we going to do a gig here? But finally, I've ended up getting good bass sound, and people have always come and appreciated the tone. I've kind of learned and trained myself to get the right tone based on what I hear from the venue. That's why I don't rely on the amp too much. I don't pump the volume too much on the amp first. I do, but eventually, only after I listen to the PA and the wedges, and I just blend the amp sound in. So most of the gigs I've been having a great time and a great sound, luckily.
So, a while back, as you explained about every aspects of a bass, right, from electronics, hardware, and all those things. So, could you emphasize on importance of properly set up bass, and how often,
Well,
or rather, do you do your own setups these days, or do you still take it?
I have done my own setup. I'm not that strong on the electronic side, so that I don't touch. that I generally take it to one service guy in Chennai. But otherwise, I can kind of adjust my truss rod, the bridge heights, and all that. See, how much do I emphasize? It's as important as owning the car. You own a car, but the wheels are not aligned. There's no use of having the most expensive car. So it all starts with setup, and also the fact that everybody are unique in the way they play. So you need to find out what comes to you naturally. You could be a hard hitting player or a soft player, both are right. You can't say one is better than the other. What comes to you naturally is what you are, that's your voice. So based on what you are interpreting on your hand, you need to find out eventually what is sounding. You got to be extremely analytical. Well, you got to have a very analytical ear to listen to yourself and understand. You should probably record and hear it, I don't know, a million times to know how you sound on each dynamic. And based on that, get into the setup of the instrument, like the action. You need to know if your truss rod is straight, and you need to understand the physics behind the guitar, because it's extremely important. It's like how we understand the body. You can't just eat and just sleep without just knowing what your body is all about. You need to know what you're allergic to. Similarly, you need to know the physics of your instrument. It's extremely important. I would say it's as important as playing.
Got it. So I'd like to conclude this chat with the last segment by talking about your current project, which is Makka. So you guys are doing really nice, and your Valentine Orwale original was amazing. As I told you on call also.
Oh, cool.
Production was really nice. I mean, more than anything.
Thank you.
Obviously, the songs, everything was nice, but production, the sounding was really nice. So
awesome. Thank you.
We'd love to have much more originals from Makka, and also
it's already happening in parallel.
Nice. So just can't wait to
working on
have those things, listen to those things on Spotify and whatnot.
Oh yeah, man. We are also extremely looking forward, because now the mindset has changed so much after COVID, but yet when we work on our own material, the kind of joy it brings us, we are just hoping the joy is transferred to all our listeners, because it's important that we share our joy through our music. We are really looking forward to that.
So and also, I would want to highlight two of the good covers, or my favorite covers from Makka. One is the Masi Masam thing. So Darnam, the slap that you did was
thanks. That's all live take.
Oh,
what you hear is the actual live take. Okay. Because I was a little adamant. I'm like, hey, no, I can't sit and play and then mime it. I'll just do a live take. So I just kept playing, and that take we took. That's it.
I mean, the slap portion was really clear. So it was actually as if you have someone has programmed it. It was really in the pocket, as you told.
Okay.
So that one thing, and secondly, Odakara Marimu. The interesting part about that arrangement is, you just listen to the song and suddenly out of nowhere, Kulicha Kutralan comes, and then it's like watching a you're just taken by surprise, almost like I know it's a very negative connotation, like watching a horror movie, like you're taken by surprise. Out of nowhere, Kulicha Kutralan comes, and that joy we experience from that arrangement, that this is how they've connected. Two of my favorites.
Yeah. Oh, both are incredible compositions. 4 compositions by AR. We just loved working on that. All our covers, we have absolute fun. Yeah, basically it all starts with having fun. We have fun, and most of the covers are recorded in this room, in this very room. Most of the covers, I would say, and we've had a great time laughing and pulling each other's leg, and have tons of memories in this very room with Makka.
So what do we expect from Alap next coming apart from Makka's originals?
Well, I'm working on my own compositions also, and I have collaborated with lyricist Madan Karki, and I have a few songs which are kind of ready already, and I'm making some plans to shoot it. yeah, get a video done, and it's going to be on my channel soon. But meanwhile, I'm working on a single that it's a collaborative project, one with one Mr. Raja from Canada. He's popularly known as New York Raja. He's a composer and a teacher back in Toronto. And I've collaborated with him on a very beautiful song that he composed. I sang, played, everything, and a beautiful song that I think I'll be uploading that very soon, by this weekend, hopefully.
Nice. And also, to we are also eagerly waiting for your bass covers.
Yeah, man. I better buckle up and start doing more. I just get into this one of those. But like you rightly said, how do you motivate yourself? Remember, I said I'm right with you because that's what happens to me most times. I just come sit here. There's so many things to do because one is the home chores, but I also run a studio right on top. It's on the second floor. It's a commercial studio, and that keeps me busy most of the time. So by the time I finish my work, I'm like so tired. But I've written the next set of songs already. More than 40 songs I've written and kept what all I have to cover. Yeah, I'll be buckling up and getting it out soon.
So all these 40s are all Raja sir songs or any other?
Yes, it's all Ilayaraja songs. Like most of us know, I'm also a Raja variant. Like Ilayaraja, hardcore variant. I can talk about him and his music, I don't know, for days without taking a break. So my inclination is mostly towards his songs, but I'll be covering few other covers also for sure because there are so many covers that I want to do that I love playing bass for. I will be doing all those for sure, and I'm so happy with so many people's response on. Of course, I don't know many views, but it's beyond the views. It's about the comments that I get,
Correct.
and it's very overwhelming for me to know that people actually listen to bass
Correct.
because that's also a musical instrument and people are actually coming and acknowledging the fact that hey, I hear it. To me, that's so overwhelming, and I'm so happy to know the response. I'll be doing much more. I'm planning to do a lot more.
Nice. So finally, your closing, whatever you wish to speak to or communicate to or a message to aspiring bassists.
Buddy, all I can say is a bass is probably the one of the most unique instruments in the world that bridges the gap between rhythm and melody. It can be a rhythmic instrument, yet it can be a melodic instrument, or it can be both at the same time. And when you have such an instrument, don't limit yourself to playing only the slap or only the rock, explore as much as possible, and don't worry if people say that they can't hear you, because I've been there so many times. Finally they'll be like, I couldn't hear the bass, or they would have heard it, they can't relate to that. Don't worry. It doesn't matter. You got to you got to back on the fact that you are happy when you play, and don't fall for the number of notes you play. Never do that. You just be happy for the fact that when a guitar player or a keyboard player plays a G major chord, and when you give the G root, now the chord sounds like a chord. So be happy about the fact that one note defines the chord, and you're the one who can do that. So keep listening to a lot more, and develop your hearing as much as possible, and have fun. That's all. Keep your ego behind and just have fun.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Alap, once again for giving.
Pleasure.
It was really fun.
Thanks to you for all the effort that you've taken, and it's nice that somebody actually takes up time, does research, and talks, and because this is also a family, right? The bass players community.
Correct.
It's nice that all of us belong to the same family, and we talk about each other and we support each other. End of the day, that's the most important part. The congregation matters a lot. So thanks, Karthik, for having me here, and I think this is my first interview talking exclusively about bass.
About bass.
So I'm glad.
Thank you so much. So good night.
Thanks, Karthik, and good luck to all your endeavors, and good night to you, and all the best for everything.
Bye bye.
Thank you.